My name is Sarah Mulligan. I'm 35 years old, a software engineer living in Austin, Texas, and I am a widowed single mom to a 10-year-old girl named Piper. The story I'm about to share took place at the end of July this year, when I took Piper back to the place where I grew up, my parents' farm in Tornillo, Texas, completely unaware that this trip would change the way I saw my sister, my parents, and even myself. The Ford F-150 hummed steadily as we headed west, the highway unspooling in front of us like a faded ribbon. The sky was that washed-out summer blue that looks beautiful until you step out of the car and feel it melt the skin off your bones. I glanced over at the passenger seat. Piper sat cross-legged, sneakers kicked off, her whole body hunched over the sketchbook I'd given her for her birthday last month. Every page was already filled with crooked houses, dramatic mountains, and characters with giant eyes and messy hair. Whenever I watched her drawing, I felt two opposite things at once: warmth and ache. Warmth, because her eyes lit up in a way I didn't see when she was doing anything else. Ache, because the person who should be sitting in that passenger seat, singing along with her, wasn't here anymore. 3 years ago, my husband Mark was killed in a traffic accident at a crosswalk near our apartment in Austin. One distracted driver, one red light, and my life split cleanly into before and after. Piper was 7 then. I still don't know who cried more that first year, her or me. "Mom?" Piper suddenly burst out, breaking the quiet of the cabin. She'd stopped drawing, her eyes shining as she stared at the radio. A familiar country song had come on. Mark used to hum it every time we took long drives, tapping the steering wheel like he was playing drums in some invisible band. "Do you remember this?" Piper asked, voice quivering between excitement and sadness. "Dad used to sing this to me when I was little, right?" I swallowed hard, my fingers clenching just a little tighter around the steering wheel. "Yeah, baby," I said softly. "He did. He loved this one." Piper started to sing along, off-key and enthusiastic, and for a few precious miles, the grief didn't feel like a stab, more like an old scar tugging under the skin. My parents' farm sits in a remote area near the Mexico border, surrounded by miles of red dirt and fields that never really look green enough. It was the backdrop of my entire childhood. It was also the place I couldn't wait to escape. At 18, I enlisted in the Marines and left Tornillo without looking back. I told myself I was chasing something bigger: freedom, a career, a life that wasn't measured by rainfall and crop prices. But I left my younger sister behind. Amber was only 12 when I left. The last real conversation we had before I shipped out is burned into my memory. She'd stood in the doorway of my room, eyes red, tears streaming down her cheeks, hands balled into fists. "You always think about yourself," she'd said, voice shaking. "You just get to run away. I'm stuck here." I told her she was being dramatic, that I'd come home, that she'd understand one day. I don't know if she ever did. I'm not sure I did either. Now, more than a year since our last visit, I was driving back with a 10-year-old who adored the aunt I barely recognized anymore. Mom's recent phone calls had filled in the blanks. Amber was 26 now. She'd just lost her third job in a year. She was living at home, between opportunities, as she put it, chasing social media dreams and brand deals that never seemed to fully materialize. But to Piper, Aunt Amber was magic. The car turned off the highway onto the red dirt road that led to the farm. My heart beat a little faster as the scenery of my childhood rose up around us, old fencing leaning at odd angles, the weathered barn, the low house with the porch that always looked smaller than I remembered. I had no idea this might be the last time I'd ever see it as just a place filled with memories, instead of the sight of a near nightmare. "Grandma's house," Piper squealed, pressing her face to the window. As soon as I parked by the porch, she flung the door open and ran toward the front steps. My mom, Marilyn, came out wiping her hands on a dish towel, gray hair pulled into a messy bun. The moment she saw Piper, her entire face crumpled. "Oh, honey," she whispered, dropping to her knees and opening her arms. Piper launched herself forward, burying her face in Grandma's shoulder. Mom hugged her so tight, I almost wanted to remind her the child needed to breathe. Tears slid down Mom's cheeks as she stroked Piper's hair. "You've grown even taller," she said shakily. "You look more like your mama every time I see you." I pretended I didn't hear the way her voice broke on that last line. From the direction of the equipment shed, my dad, Earl, appeared, hands stained with machine oil. He's the kind of man whose worry lives mostly in his eyes and the way his shoulders slump when he thinks no one is looking. Hey, sweetheart, he said to me, clapping my shoulder before pulling me into a quick hug that smelled like diesel and dust. Good to have you home. And then finally, there was Amber. She was leaning against the doorframe, phone in hand, thumbs moving fast. Her hair was perfectly styled. Her t-shirt and jeans looked casual in that calculated online influencer way. She glanced up for half a second, eyes skimming over me and landing straight on Piper, then dropped back to her screen. It wasn't until Piper ran over to her, shouting, "Aunt Amber," that Amber slid the phone into her back pocket and bent down with a quick but genuine hug. "I missed you," Amber said, planting a kiss on Piper's forehead. "Have you been using the birthday gift I sent?" Piper immediately held up her sketchbook like a trophy. "This is the best thing I've ever gotten," she beamed. "I use it every day." Amber's smile, for that brief moment, actually reached her eyes, and I felt something twist inside me. Because for all her irresponsibility, for all the fights and slammed doors and job losses, there was still a part of Amber that truly loved my daughter. That made everything that came later 1,000 times harder. Dinner that night was beef stew, the same recipe my mom had made my entire childhood. One spoonful and I was 13 again, sweaty from the fields, listening to Dad talk about crop yields and pest control like they were the weather. But the air around the table wasn't the same. Earl stirred his stew with a faraway look. Finally, he set his spoon down and cleared his throat. "This year's drought is worse than last," he said. "Irrigation costs are up 40%, and the main pump's acting up again. If we can't fix it this week, we could lose most of the pepper harvest." I turned to Amber, trying to bridge something, anything. "So, what are you doing in the city now?" I asked. "Mom said you changed jobs again?" Amber tapped a fingernail against the table, avoiding my eyes. "Office work doesn't suit me," she said lightly. "But my Instagram is doing better. I hit 5,000 followers last week. A cosmetics brand wants to collab." Dad's jaw tightened. He put his fork down a bit too hard. Mom rushed in like she always does to smooth things over. "She's good with social media, Sarah," Mom said. "Amber could help us promote the farm's products online. Maybe that'd bring in some extra buyers." While the three of us adults drifted toward tension, Piper sat pressed against Amber's side, absorbing every word. "When are you going to show me how to edit photos like you?" Piper asked eagerly. "You said you'd teach me next time we came." Amber smiled, ruffling Piper's hair. "Tomorrow," she promised. "We'll take some aesthetic shots for your own little feed." Piper's eyes lit up like someone had switched on a string of fairy lights inside her. After dinner, Dad asked me out onto the porch. The night air was cooler but carried that dry, baked smell of thirsty earth. Crickets screamed in the dark fields. Dad leaned on the railing, staring out toward the pepper plants. "I don't know what to do about Amber anymore," he said quietly. "She's 26, still living like she's 16. We tried to give her everything we couldn't give you. Maybe we gave her too much." I didn't say anything for a moment. I just watched the faint outline of the fields and listened to my daughter laughing inside with my sister. Guilt crept up my spine like ivy. I left. Amber stayed, and now my parents were carrying both of us in different ways. Lying in my old bed that night, the ceiling fan whirring above me, I stared at the water-stained patch on the ceiling and wondered if I'd helped make Amber who she was by leaving when I did. I watched Piper and Amber's laughter flicker under the door like light from another world. I had no idea that within 12 hours, my trust in that bond would be shattered in the ugliest way possible. The morning it all fell apart started out beautiful. At 5 a.m., the roosters started their shrill argument with the sun, and the smell of pancakes dragged me out of sleep. For a second, I had that disoriented city feeling. Where am I? What's that sound? Why does the air smell like butter and soil instead of coffee and printer ink? Then I heard Piper laugh. I threw on a t-shirt and padded down the hallway. The kitchen was warm and bright, golden light spilling over chipped countertops and the old round table that had seen every fight and celebration our family ever had. Piper stood on a stool beside my mom, both of them dusted in flour like they'd come out of a snowstorm. My daughter held a spatula like it was a sacred tool. On the stove, pancakes sizzled in a cast-iron skillet, studded with fresh raspberries from the backyard. "Look, Mom," Piper beamed when she saw me. "I flipped one all by myself and it didn't break." I put my hand over my heart. "Well, that's it. I can retire from parenting. You've reached peak life achievement." She giggled, cheeks pink with pride. Mom slid a pancake onto a plate and nudged Piper. "Go give that to your mama," she said softly, eyes crinkling. Piper carried the plate to the table with exaggerated care, like it was a priceless artifact. She set it in front of me and bounced on her toes. "Taste it," she demanded. I cut a piece, popped it into my mouth, and closed my eyes. It tasted exactly like my childhood. Too much butter, not enough sugar, a little tang from the raspberries. It's perfect, I said. Better than Grandma's, honestly. Mom snorted. Watch it, girl. But there was warmth in her voice that hadn't been there last night. I glanced at the clock on the wall, 7:48 a.m. Amber still asleep? I asked casually. Mom sighed, wiping her hands on the dish towel. She rarely wakes up before 10, she said. Even here, night owl or phone owl. There was that fragile mix of love and frustration in her tone. Piper, oblivious, plopped down beside me and began telling me all about the photo shoot she and Amber were planning. She's going to show me how to take pictures that look like movies, Piper said breathlessly, and how to make colors pop. She said my drawings and photos could go together and tell a story. I smiled, trying to ignore the prickle of unease in my chest. Amber loved big promises. It was follow-through she struggled with. Around 9, Dad called from the back door. Sarah, come take a look at this, he said, voice heavier than usual. I followed him out toward the pepper fields. 5 acres of plants stretched out in front of us, their leaves drooping, soil cracked like old paint. The air already felt sharp and dry, like it was trying to peel moisture off your skin. Dad fiddled with the main water pump, frowning. The machine coughed, rattled, and then let out a sad grinding noise before falling silent. That's not good, I muttered. He shook his head. Without water in the next 48 hours, we could lose the whole crop. How much is the crop worth? I asked, even though I knew he'd already done the math 100 times. About 85,000, he said quietly, and that's before costs. I let out a low whistle. For them, that wasn't just a bad year. That was the line between barely making it and falling behind on everything. Harvey's Farm Supply still open in town? I asked. Dad nodded. They should be. Then let's go, I said. 2 heads are better than 1, and I know my way around broken machinery diagrams. We'll figure out what you need. He looked at me, a flicker of relief showing through the worry. You sure? I don't want to drag you into all this. Dad, I said, giving him a look. You're not dragging me. I'm here. Let me help. He hesitated, then nodded. All right, I'll gather the old parts. We'll leave in 15. Back in the kitchen, Mom was packing sandwiches into a faded cooler. I have the Farmers Association meeting at 10, she said. We're planning the Harvest Festival. I'll stay with Piper until I have to leave. Then I'll wake Amber. She can keep an eye on her. The unease pricked again, sharper this time. Amber and keep an eye on did not naturally belong in the same sentence. I leaned into the doorway of Piper's room. She lay on her stomach on the bed, ankles crossed in the air, nose buried in a book. Her sketchbook and pencils were spread out beside her like an art explosion. Hey, Bug, I said, sitting on the edge of the mattress. Grandma's with you until she leaves for her meeting. After that, Aunt Amber's in charge. Piper looked up, eyes bright. Are you going to help Grandpa with the machines? Yeah, I said. We're going to save the Pepper Army. She gasped. The Pepper Army must be protected at all costs. I laughed, then sobered. Be good, okay? Stay on the property. Listen to Grandma and Aunt Amber. When I get back, I'll take you to the ice cream place in town. Her whole face lit up. Promise? Promise. She wrapped her arms around my neck and pulled me close, her breath warm in my ear. I love being here, she whispered. I feel like we're a real big family again. Something tugged ache hard behind my ribs. I love you, I murmured, kissing her hair. I'll be back soon. I wish I'd hugged her longer. The drive to Harvey's took about half an hour. Dad spent most of it listing off specs and part numbers in that half mutter he uses when he's scared but trying to stay practical. I kept glancing at the truck's thermometer. 87 dF at 9 a.m. By noon, the road would feel like an oven rack. I thought of Piper's thin t-shirts, her city kid tolerance for walking maybe 10 minutes between air-conditioned buildings, and felt a little twinge of worry. But Mom would be with her. Amber would be up eventually. The farm had always felt dangerous in the abstract. Broken bones, snakes, machinery accidents. Not the kind of danger that came from other people. Harvey's Farm Supply smelled like dust, metal, and coffee that had been burnt into existence 3 hours too long. We spread the faulty parts on the counter, and the guy behind the register started listing replacements. For a moment, I felt something like satisfaction. I could actually do something to help, besides just sending money when emergencies cropped up. Then my phone buzzed. The screen lit up with a notification from work. Emergency. Priority 1 incident. My stomach dropped. That tag was only used for serious outages. System down, clients screaming, the kind of mess that got executives on conference calls. Sorry, I muttered to Dad. Give me a minute. He nodded, understanding too well what work emergency meant in my line of job. I stepped aside, opened my laptop on a dusty side table, tethered my phone, and joined the incident call. Voices overlapped in my headset. Engineers, managers, somebody's boss's boss, demanding timelines. For the next 45 minutes, my brain was split in two, one part talking through server logs and rollback plans, the other part tracking the time, replaying Piper's whisper, "I love being here." By the time we left Harvey's, the incident was contained, but my nerves were frayed. I climbed back into the passenger seat, glancing at the time, a little after noon. Dad started the engine, carefully placing the new parts on the back seat. "We're cutting it close for the peppers," he muttered, "but it'll be tight and doable." I stared at my phone for a moment, then hit the call button for the house phone. It rang and rang and rang. No answer. I told myself Mom was still in her meeting, that Amber was in the shower, that Piper was outside chasing chickens, laughing with her aunt, phone left on a table somewhere. I called Mom's cell, straight to voicemail. The unease that had been a background hum all morning turned into a low, steady drumbeat. Dad must have felt me tensing. His hands tightened on the wheel. "We'll be home soon," he said, pushing the truck a little faster. I stared out the window at the red dirt racing by, thinking about all the ways a quiet farm could not be safe. We pulled into the yard at 1:15 p.m. The first thing I noticed was the heat. It hit me like an open oven door when I stepped out of the truck. The second thing I noticed was the silence. No Piper laughing, no Mom talking, no music. Just the wind scratching across dry grass and the soft tick-tick-tick of the cooling engine. "Piper?" I called, heading toward the porch. "Mom?" Nothing. The living room was empty. So was the kitchen. A half-eaten sandwich sat on the counter, edges drying out. A glass with a lipstick smudge, Mom's, stood beside the sink. "Mom must still be at her meeting," Dad said, but I heard the tightness in his voice. I walked down the hallway, my heartbeat picking up speed. Piper's room was empty, the book she'd been reading lying open face down, like she'd dropped it mid-sentence. A cold finger traced the back of my neck. I moved faster toward Amber's room. The door was half closed, light spilling through the gap. I pushed it open. Amber lay sprawled on her bed, AirPods in, phone held above her face. The curtains were mostly drawn, her room a different world entirely, from the scorched afternoon outside. Something inside me snapped. I crossed the room in 3 strides and yanked one AirPod out of her ear. She flinched, glaring. "What the Sarah? What's your problem?" "Where's Piper?" I demanded. My voice didn't sound like mine. It was too flat, too sharp. Amber blinked, annoyed confusion furrowing her brow. "She went to buy drinks. She said she was thirsty and I wasn't about to go out in that heat." She waved vaguely toward the window. "Mini-Mart. It's like a 10-minute walk." For a second, the words didn't compute. Mini-Mart, 10-minute walk. Alone. The world tilted. My pulse roared in my ears. "Alone?" I repeated, every syllable trembling. Amber finally sat up, sensing something in my face that didn't match the casual tone of her own voice. "It's not a big deal," she said quickly. "We walked there plenty of times. She knows the way." I grabbed onto the bed frame to steady myself. "How long ago did she leave?" Amber's fingers worried the edge of a pillow. She glanced at the digital clock on her nightstand, then at her phone, doing a sloppy bit of mental math. "Like 45 minutes?" she said. "Maybe." 45 minutes. For a 10-minute walk. Something icy and electric shot down my spine. Behind me, I heard Dad suck in a breath. "Dear God," he whispered. I turned back to Amber, vision tunneling. The image of the empty, exposed road flashed in my mind. No houses, no shade, no one to hear a child scream. "That road isn't safe," Dad said hoarsely. "Not anymore. There was an attempted kidnapping 30 miles from here last week. The sheriff said—" I didn't hear the rest. My body moved before my brain caught up. I spun on my heel and sprinted down the hallway, the house blurring around me. The front door banged against the wall as I threw it open. The heat slammed into me, but I barely felt it. All I could see was the red dirt road stretching away from the farm like a bad decision, and the 10-year-old who trusted us to keep her safe walking alone on it. I took off down the steps, my feet already hitting the packed earth, lungs burning with one panicked thought that drowned out everything else. Find her. Find her now. The world narrowed to a single line of red dirt stretching ahead of me. The sun hammered down like it wanted to pin me to the ground, but I ran anyway. I don't remember deciding to run. My body simply moved. Pure instinct, pure terror, pure mother. Somewhere behind me, I heard Dad shouting, "Sarah, wait!" His truck engine roared to life a second later, tires clawing at the driveway as he pulled onto the road. He drove beside me, matching my pace, window rolled down. His face was pale beneath his sun-weathered skin. "Get in," he yelled. "We'll find her faster." "No," I screamed, not slowing. I couldn't sit, couldn't wait, couldn't separate myself from the ground Piper was walking on. Every step felt like a countdown. Every breath scraped like sandpaper in my throat. I knew this road, knew every dip, every rock, every place someone could hide. And I also knew this was not the road a child should ever walk alone. Not after the missing kids in the past year, not after the police warnings, not after every parent in this county whispered, "Thank God it wasn't mine," at night. But Amber didn't think about any of that. Amber only thought about heat and convenience and her damn phone. My chest burned as I pushed myself harder. The red dirt road cut like a scar between fields, empty, exposed, silent. To my left, a withered cornfield, stalks brittle and brown. To my right, low rock walls and scattered boulders, cracked and jagged, the kind of places where coyotes hid during the hottest hours, or where a grown man could crouch unseen. No houses, no shade, no passers-by. Just an endless sun-bleached corridor. My mind painted Piper into the scene. Thin arms, soft city shoes, flushed cheeks, clutching a cheap plastic bag, squinting under the brutal sun, with no water, no hat, and no sense of what kind of danger lived on quiet roads. Her voice echoed in my mind. "I love being here. We're like a real big family again." My heart cracked with every thought of how I had failed her by trusting someone who didn't deserve that trust. I rounded a curve where a massive boulder blocked part of the road, and that's when I saw them. 100 yards ahead, Piper, my baby, standing frozen, shoulders hunched, eyes wide like a terrified fawn. And in front of her, a tall, thin man bending toward her, arm extended, something shiny in his hand. For a heartbeat, the world stopped. Then everything inside me detonated. "Piper!" Her name ripped out of my throat with a force I didn't know I had. It wasn't a word. It was a survival scream. The man jerked his head toward me, startled. Piper's little body flinched, but she didn't run. She couldn't. She was petrified. I sprinted faster, faster, lungs screaming, vision narrowing to the space between them. And that's when I heard it, the man's voice, oily sweet, coaxing. "Come with me, sweetheart. I've got more candy at home. It's just a minute from here." My stomach turned to molten lead. And Piper, oh God, Piper, was clutching the mini-mart bag to her chest like a shield, her knuckles white, lips cracked from the heat. Her hair was plastered to her forehead with sweat. She looked like she might faint. "Don't touch her," I roared. The man straightened too slowly. He didn't back away until I was almost on top of him. The last few yards disappeared under my feet. I threw myself between him and my daughter, planting both hands against his chest and shoving with every ounce of fear, fury, and strength my body could gather. He stumbled backward, hands up. Hey, he protested. "I was just talking to her." "Shut up," I snarled. My voice didn't even sound human. My Marine training hit me like muscle memory. Stance, balance, assessing threats, blocking Piper with my body. Behind me, Piper let out a sharp, choked sob. That sound nearly tore me apart. I reached back blindly and found her arm, pulling her into me. Her whole body was trembling, hot as fire. "Baby, I'm here," I whispered, eyes locked on the man. I've got you. I've got you." She burst into tears, clinging to my waist, her voice breaking apart. "Aunt Amber said I should do the walk by myself, so I wouldn't be a baby." A fresh wave of rage surged up my spine. Amber hadn't just been careless. She had weaponized Piper's insecurities to get out of standing in the sun. The man took a step backward. "Look, lady, she said she was lost." "Don't you dare lie to me." I stepped forward, fists clenched, ready to break every bone in his body if he so much as breathed wrong. The man flinched. The bag in his hand fell to the ground. Candy bars and a Coca-Cola rolling across the dirt like discarded evidence. That's when I heard tires screech. Dad's truck fishtailed to a stop behind us. He jumped out, eyes blazing the moment he saw the man's face. "Dirk Acres," he bellowed. The man stumbled back another step. Dad stormed forward with a force I didn't think a 67-year-old could still possess. He grabbed Dirk by the collar and slammed him against a tree so hard the leaves shook. "You sick bastard," Dad hissed. "How long have you been out of prison this time? 2 months? 3? Dirk's face went chalk white. He tried to wriggle free, but Dad tightened his grip. You go near another child in this county, Dad growled, and you won't walk away. Part of me wanted to help Dad throw this man into the ground until he begged for mercy, but Piper needed me more. I scooped her up, feeling how limp her arms were around my neck. Her skin was radiating heat, too much heat. Baby, are you hurt? Did he touch you? I asked urgently. She shook her head, sobbing. No, he kept asking me to go, and I got scared. I kissed her forehead, feeling the unnatural heat there, and carried her to the truck. You're safe, I whispered over and over. You're safe. I've got you. I strapped her into the back seat, my hands trembling so badly I could barely snap the buckle into place. Stay here, I told her gently. I'm right outside. When I turned back, Dad had let go of Dirk but was still blocking his path, hands curled into fists, chest rising in sharp, furious breaths. Get Piper home, Dad said without taking his eyes off Dirk. I'll handle this. Dirk was shaking, legs wobbling. He knew Dad recognized him. He knew he was in deep trouble. I didn't argue. Piper needed water, shade, safety. She needed me. As we sped down the dirt road, Dad already had one hand on the wheel and one on his phone, calling the sheriff. Name is Dirk Akers, Dad said in a cold, clipped voice. Repeat offender. I have his description. License plate 2. I stared at the rearview mirror. Piper sat in the back seat, staring at nothing, tears drying on her cheeks, her little hands shaking. Fear and fury twisted inside me until I felt like I might explode. And then, like poison rising to the surface, came the next unbearable thought. Amber did this. Amber sent my child out alone. Amber ignored the dangers. Amber didn't care enough to get off the bed. And now I had to walk into that farmhouse and face her. And I had no idea what would happen when I did. The moment we pulled into the yard, the heat seemed to thicken, as if even the air knew what was about to happen. I killed the engine and jumped out before the truck had fully stopped. I yanked open the back door and lifted Piper into my arms. She clung to me with both arms wrapped around my neck, her body still trembling. Her cheek, pressed against my shoulder, felt too hot, feverish from the sun and fear. We stepped into the house. My mom had just come back from her meeting. She froze in the middle of the living room when she saw Piper's red, tear-stained face and my expression, a sharp, barely contained fury that felt like electricity under my skin. Oh my God, Mom whispered, rushing toward us. What happened? Sarah, what happened to her? I didn't look at my mother when I answered. I couldn't. My voice was an icicle. Ask your daughter. The words hit the room like a crack of thunder. Mom stood motionless, panic filling her features as she turned slowly toward the hallway. I carried Piper to the bathroom, keeping my voice soft, my hands gentle, even though my stomach felt like acid. I sat her on the counter, washed her face, cooled her skin with damp towels, whispered comfort into her hair. But underneath every soothing word was the truth waiting for me like a loaded weapon. Amber left my daughter alone. Amber put her in the path of a predator. Amber almost cost me everything. When I finally left Piper resting with a glass of water in her hands, I walked back into the living room. Amber stood there, hands on her hips, eyes confused, defensive, ready to argue because she still didn't know. What's wrong with her? She demanded, looking straight at me. Why'd she come in here crying like that? What did you do? Something inside me snapped so violently that for a moment I saw white. What did I do? I repeated slowly, stepping closer. Let me tell you what I did. Amber blinked, confusion turning to a flicker of worry. I saved my daughter, I said, each word heavy as stone, from a grown man who was trying to lure her into going with him. Amber's face drained of color. She stumbled back a step. What? No. I didn't know. You didn't care to know, I spat. You didn't think. You didn't even get out of bed. She shook her head frantically. You're exaggerating. Kids walk that road all the time. We used to... I took one step forward, cutting her off, my voice a razor. That was 20 years ago. Before the kidnappings, before the warnings, before a predator moved back into the county. Amber's breath caught. Dad entered the room at that moment, his face still carved with the fury he'd unleashed on Dirk. What's going on? Amber whispered, looking between us. Dad's voice was low, shaking with anger he rarely allowed himself to feel. Sarah found Piper with Dirk Akers. Amber's jaw dropped, her knees buckled slightly. Dirk? She whispered. From the news? The one who was trying to lure her, I snapped. Yes. She covered her mouth with her hand. Oh my God, I didn't know. That's the problem, I said. You never know. You never think. You never take responsibility for anything. Amber started shaking her head desperately. I didn't realize... You didn't realize because you don't listen, I said. You don't care about anything unless it's on your phone. Her eyes filled with tears. But for the first time, I didn't feel sorry, not even a little. Because 10 minutes more, just 10, and my daughter might have disappeared forever. Dad's voice erupted like a gunshot. Enough. Amber and I both froze. I had heard my father angry before, but never like this. It wasn't yelling born of irritation. It was the kind that comes from pure terror, pure pain, pure parental instinct. Amber stepped backward as if the force of his tone had shoved her. He pointed at her with a trembling hand. You put my granddaughter in danger. You sent her out alone, on that road. But Dad, I didn't know. You didn't care to know, he thundered. You didn't even wake up. Your mother had to leave, and you didn't bother to check on a 10-year-old child. Amber's mouth opened, closed. Tears ran silently down her cheeks. From the hallway, a small voice interrupted the storm. Please don't be mad at Aunt Amber. Piper stood there, clutching her sleeves, her eyes still puffy, but full of fear. Not fear of the man anymore, but of the fight erupting around her. I wanted to show her I'm not a little kid, Piper whispered. I wanted to be brave, like she said. The room went still. Amber flinched as if she'd been slapped. Dad's face twisted, grief and rage mixing together. He turned to me, his voice now steel. Sarah, kitchen, now. The kitchen felt too small for the three of us. Dad leaned on the counter, gripping his coffee cup so tightly his knuckles turned white. Mom stood near the sink, eyes red, tears slipping down silently. Dad looked at me. What are you planning to do? My answer came instantly. Report Dirk. I need this on record. I need the police to know what happened. Dad nodded. Good. But then he inhaled sharply. And what about Amber? A bitter laugh scraped my throat. What do you think I should do? Let it slide? Like every other time she's messed up? Dad slammed the cup onto the counter. Coffee splashed across the wood. Mom jumped. No, he said. Not this time. I stared at him. I wasn't used to seeing my father choose consequence over comfort when it came to Amber. But he wasn't wavering. Not today. Not after almost losing Piper. He said quietly, she needs to face what she's done, or she'll never grow up. Mom finally spoke. Her voice was barely above a whisper, but firm. We can't protect her anymore. Not from this. Something loosened and hurt inside me at the same time. Because they weren't choosing Amber. They were choosing Piper. Dad straightened. His voice was final. 2 options. She faces the police for neglect, or she moves out. 30 days. Find a job. Support herself. No more free ride. Mom placed her hand on his arm, eyes glistening. We've agreed on this, she said softly. I exhaled slowly. This wasn't revenge. This wasn't cruelty. This was the first moment in 20 years that my parents were drawing a line they should have drawn long ago. Let's tell her, Dad said. Amber was on the sofa, hands trembling, her phone forgotten beside her. Dad stood in front of her like a judge passing sentence. You have 2 choices, he said flatly. 1, Sarah reports everything, including your negligence, to the police. You deal with the consequences. Amber's eyes went wide with horror. What? No, I'll get in trouble. Dad didn't flinch. 2, he continued. You have 30 days to move out, get a job, pay your own bills, grow up. Amber's mouth fell open. She looked at each of us, waiting for someone, Mom, Dad, me, to crack, to soften, to rescue her. But no one moved. Not this time. Finally, her shoulders slumped. Her voice came out small, choked. Fine, I'll move out. I stepped forward, my voice steady. And I am reporting Dirk. That's non-negotiable. Amber nodded, defeated, tears spilling down her cheeks. Then she looked up at me, and for the first time since we arrived, her voice broke with real fear. Will you tell Piper she can't see me anymore? The question stunned me. Not because of the words, but because they were the first honest ones she'd spoken. She wasn't afraid of punishment. She was afraid of losing Piper. Images flashed through my mind. Amber teaching Piper to braid hair. Amber sending little gifts. Piper's face lighting up whenever she heard Amanda's name. I swallowed hard. That depends on you, I said quietly. If you grow up, if you prove you can be responsible, then yes, I'll consider it. A flicker, tiny but real, lit in Amber's eyes. Hope. And something else I hadn't seen in years. Determination. For the first time, my sister actually looked like she wanted to change. But wanting and doing are different mountains. And she was only now reaching the trailhead. 2 months later, life looked different in 100 tiny ways. Some painful, some healing, some quietly miraculous. I never imagined a single day on that red dirt road could redraw the entire landscape of our family. But it did. Because some near misses don't fade, they echo, they reshape everything. Dirk Akers didn't get far. The moment Dad reported him, and the sheriff heard that my daughter was the child he'd approached, they moved fast. Dirk was arrested for violating his restraining order, and because of his prior convictions for harassment and attempted child abduction, the charges were severe. He won't be walking free anytime soon, and he'll never be allowed within miles of areas where children gather ever again. Every time I think of how close Piper came to disappearing into his hands, I feel my stomach twist. Sometimes at night, I still wake up sweating. Sometimes I check the locks twice. Sometimes Piper crawls into my bed, silent as a question, and curls against me until she falls asleep. Healing doesn't happen like a light switch. It's more like watching ice melt. Amber moved out exactly 30 days after we gave her the ultimatum. The day we left the farm, she stood on the porch with a cardboard box of clothes and notebooks, her eyes red. Whether from tears or exhaustion, I didn't know. Piper waved from the truck window. Amber lifted her hand, hesitated, then waved back, small and tentative. I didn't know if we would ever reach a place where I could trust my sister again, but I did know this. Piper loved her. And love, especially a child's love, is not something to throw away casually. Still, for weeks I stayed silent. No visits. Short texts, mostly logistics. I needed distance. Amber needed accountability. We both needed time. Piper didn't stop thinking about her aunt. Sometimes she'd ask in a quiet voice, "Is Aunt Amber mad at me?" Or, "Do you think she misses me?" Or the question that always broke me a little, "Will she get another chance? Like how you give me chances when I mess up?" Kids have a way of cutting straight to the truth adults dance around. And she was right. People grow only when they're given the chance to, but chances come with conditions, boundaries, consequences. A week ago, I decided Piper was ready, and I realized maybe I was ready too. So we sat together in a little coffee shop near Amber's new apartment. Piper stared out the window with her sketchbook open, tapping her fingers nervously. She'd drawn a shaky version of Amber wearing sunglasses, holding a phone, smiling. She erased and redrew the smile 5 times. "Do you think she'll look different?" Piper asked. "I think she'll look like herself," I said softly. "Just a little older." The bell above the door jingled. We turned, and there she was. Amber looked almost unrecognizable, not because she'd become someone else, but because she'd finally stopped pretending to be someone she wasn't. Her makeup was minimal, her clothes were simple, clean jeans, a soft sweater. Her hair pulled back in a loose ponytail. Tired eyes, but steadier than I'd seen in years. She approached the table hesitantly, almost bracing herself. "Hey," she whispered. Piper shot up from her seat and flung her arms around Amber's waist. Amber froze for a split second, then melted, hugging her niece tightly, burying her face in Piper's hair. "I missed you," Piper whispered. Amber's voice cracked. "I missed you too. So much." When we sat down, Amber placed her hands on the table, palms pressing against each other, grounding herself. "So," she said with a shaky breath, I've been working." She gave me a tiny, almost embarrassed smile. "I've held a job for 2 months. Administrative assistant at an accounting office. Not glamorous, but it's steady. And I'm paying all my own bills now. Rent, food, everything." I nodded slowly. "Good," I said. "That's good, Amber." She looked down at her hands. "I didn't realize how hard it is. Just to be an adult. You and Mom and Dad made it look easy. Or maybe I just wasn't paying attention." Her voice broke again. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "For everything. For that day. For what I put Piper through. I didn't think. And she trusted me." Tears welled in her eyes. "I won't forgive myself for a long time, but I'm trying. I'm really trying." Piper reached across the table and placed her small hand over her aunt's. "I forgive you," she said simply, "but you have to be better now." Amber let out a breath that sounded like a sob and a laugh intertwined. "I will," she whispered. "I promise." Since then, my parents have been adjusting too. Dad fixed the pump with the parts we bought that day. The pepper field survived, and something inside him shifted. He became firmer with Amber, but softer with Piper, as if he realized exactly how close he came to losing her, and wanted to make every minute count. Mom visits us more often now. She brings casseroles and fresh peaches, but she also brings something more valuable. Stories of how Amber is waking up early, going to work, paying bills, asking for advice instead of handouts. It isn't perfection. It's progress. Amber and I talk now, with boundaries. Slowly, cautiously, honestly. Last week she texted, "Can I visit you and Piper in Austin next month?" I started to type a long, cautious message. But before I could, Piper leaned over and whispered, "Say yes, Mom, but only if she keeps her promise." So I typed back, "Yes, but we move slow, and you keep doing the work." Amber replied with a simple heart emoji. No sparkles, no filters, just sincerity. It felt like the beginning of something new. Now, sitting here telling you this story, I've come to understand something. The line between love and indulgence, between responsibility and control, it's thinner than we realize. Sometimes love means holding someone tight, and sometimes it means stepping back and letting them fall so they learn how to stand. That day on the red dirt road nearly broke our family, but it also forced us to set boundaries we should have set years ago. Amber gets another chance, not because she deserves it automatically, but because she's earning it. And Piper, she's healing. Slowly, bravely, beautifully. Kids have a resilience adults often forget. As for me, I'm still learning, still navigating the terrifying and beautiful terrain of being a mom, a sister, a daughter, a woman who loves fiercely and imperfectly. But if I had to step onto that road again, if I had to face that man again, if I had to confront my sister again, I'd do it every single time, without hesitation. Because protecting your child is the clearest truth in the world. Everything else is noise. Thank you for listening. And if this story made you think or feel or question, don't forget to subscribe and join me next time for another journey into the kinds of stories that change us.